The world is a cesspool of Jew hate. We need to call it out. Jews always just want to get along. They just want to be friendly with everybody. But it's not working anymore. They're not letting us be friendly with everyone. Not anymore. We need to be honest and call out the Jew hate. What is Jew hate? Jew hate is very simply three things: double standards, delegitimization, and scapegoating. When you say there's one organization for all the refugees in the world, unless of course you're Palestinian, then you get your own special UNRWA. That is a double standard, right? You're cherry picking the enemies of the Jews for special help and consideration. Case in point, why is it that the only refugee status in the world that's passed down through heredity, meaning you have kids, those kids automatically get that status? Why is the only one in the world the Palestinians? Why is that? Why is Hadid is a rich guy, lives in America, has American citizenship? Why is it that he is a Palestinian refugee, even though he has citizenship? Once you have citizenship, you're not a refugee. So just recently, we have Spain, and they are coming out saying, we're done with Israel. We're going to stop arms sales, which they barely had any arms sales to begin with. And we're going to stop fuel. We're basically going to BDS Israel. Let's hear it. Let's hear this guy. I went through the liberty of translating it to English.
The government of Spain has decided to take a further step and immediately implement 9 additional actions to stop the genocide in Gaza, to pursue those responsible, and to support the Palestinian population. The first is the urgent approval of a royal decree.
The first things that he's taken, that there's a genocide is a fact. A genocide is not a casual charge. Even when in Sudan, when 300,000 people were slaughtered in Darfur, it was not labeled a genocide, because not only do you have to prove that civilians were killed in massive numbers, you have to prove that there was intent and that there was no other military way to accomplish what was accomplished. So in this case, in Gaza, we have about 600,000 people, according to Hamas, and we have no independent verification that this is true. And by the way, no natural deaths. So he's saying it's a genocide like it's a fact, but it's not a fact. It's not a fact. It's an opinion. It's conjecture. It's his belief.
That legally consolidates the arms.
Moreover, how does any of this stop it? Let's say there really was a genocide. How could you stop it with these measures? Let's see.
Embargo on Israel, which we have already been applying de facto since October 2023, and that establishes a legal and permanent ban on buying and selling weapons, ammunition, and military equipment to Israel. Along with this significant embargo, there is also the strict prohibition of passage through or by all Spanish ports for any and all ships transporting fuel that is specifically destined for the Israeli armed forces. This measure aims to further restrict military supplies. Third, the explicit denial of entry into Spanish airspace to all state air.
In other words, he's trying to remove the ability for Jewish people to defend themselves. If this was about stopping a genocide, then you would focus on, first of all, let the people out. If there really is, let's say there really was a genocide, the first thing you would do is try to see if people can leave. Just like during the Ukraine war, Ukrainians are able to leave, right? They're able to leave and go somewhere else. What about in Gaza? Are people able to leave? No, they're not able to leave. If there really is a genocide, wouldn't that be the first thing you do? Why is the pressure on Israel? Shouldn't the pressure be on Egypt or Jordan to take so-called Palestinian refugees, wouldn't that be the first thing you would do? During World War II, once it was understood that there was a Holocaust going on, right? What was the what would you want to do to save their lives? Open up the borders, let people leave.
Transporting defense material, specifically military equipment, destined for Israel. The prohibition of entry into Spanish territory for all those individuals who directly participate in genocide, human rights violations, and war crimes in the Gaza Strip. Fifth is the prohibition of importing products originating from illegal settlements in Gaza and the West Bank with the aim of combating these occupations.
What makes something a settlement? What makes something an occupation? That is Jewish. Is Cyprus, half of it is held by Turkey, is that an occupation? Apparently not. What about the part of Armenia that is controlled by Azerbaijan? Is that a genocide? Apparently not. None of those are genocides. None of those are occupations. But Jews living in Judea, the land that their name comes from, that's an occupation. The whole thing is Jew hate. If you're just a fair-minded person and you don't take anything that he says as fact, you can see everything he's saying is not fair. Where is the finding that there's genocide? Where is the legal finding that there's genocide? Where is the legal finding that this is occupation? Occupation of what country? Jordan? Egypt? There's never been a country of Palestine. How can there be an occupation? How can it be an occupation?
The eighth will be the increase of our contribution, of Spain's contribution to UNRWA, the United Nations agency responsible for assisting the people of Gaza, by approximately 10 million additional euros. And the ninth, the increase in the allocation for humanitarian aid and cooperation for Gaza to reach 150.
Why do Palestinians have their own separate refugee UN group? Why? Why all the refugees in the world have one group, but this small group of Arab Muslims have their own special refugee group? Jew hate. There's no other explanation for it. There's no reason we need a special organization just to help out one group of people. It doesn't make any sense. And the fact is that there were just as many Jewish refugees at that time as there were so-called Palestinian refugees. Today, there's about 15 million Palestinians. So there's slightly more Palestinians in the world today than there are Jews. And remember, in 1948, there was only something like 4 million Palestinians, while there were approximately, some say 8 to 10 million Jews. Before the war, there was 15 million Jews. There's still just about 15 million Jews. I don't think these people are dying out anytime soon. And yet, they have all these special perks.
Million euros next year, in 2026. We know that all these measures will not be enough to stop the invasion or the war crimes, but we hope that they will serve to add pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government to alleviate some of the suffering endured by the Palestinian population, and also so that Spanish society as a whole knows and feels
this
that
is
in the face of one of the
signaling.
infamous episodes of the 21st century, their country, Spain, was on the right side of history.
In other words, before we even know any facts, before we even know all the facts, how many people actually died during this war, it's going to take years. It's going to take at least for the fighting to stop and for there being to be an extensive census. It's going to be at least a year, if not 2 years, before we can know how many people actually really died. So before the guns have even fallen silent, they already know it's a war crime. They already know it's a genocide. They already know that Israel's responsible, and they're only blaming Israel. This is 100% unmitigated Jew hate. Unmitigated Jew hate. 100%. And we need to call it out for what it is. And I hear so many people say we overuse the term anti-Semitic. We need to stop using the term anti-Semitic. We need to reduce the use of the term anti-Semitic. I disagree. I think we need to do it more. We need to do it more. Because the more we say it, the more some people will start to see what we're saying is true. Because I promise you, they never miss an opportunity to repeat the lies, to repeat that Jews have been kicked out of over 100 countries in the world. And instead of saying, wow, the Jews have been victimized, the Jews have been treated wrong, the Jews have been unjustly regarded, they'll make it like it's the Jews' fault. It's the Jews' fault that they were kicked out of every country. Not the fact that leaders exploited the Jews for taxes, because Jews have always been productive members of society. And then when it was politically convenient, kicked them out the country. And that's what happened over and over and over again. Over and over again. I mean, we need to shout this from the rooftops. And I don't care if anybody believes us. I don't care if anybody follows us. It's the truth. And the truth has its own power. Because people are starting to see why Israel has had such a hard time with these so-called Palestinians. Because the ones who are going to these different countries, they are causing so many issues. So many issues. Do me a favor. Next time you see anti-Semitism, which is scapegoating, double standards, and delegitimization. Next time you see somebody claiming, well, those Jews are just Polish, Eastern Europeans, converts. They're delegitimizing, because even if someone's a convert, that doesn't make them less. Someone isn't less of a Christian because they converted to Christianity. They're not less of a Muslim because they reverted, as they like to say. They converted to Islam. Someone is not less of a Jew because they converted. They're not less of a Jew. So it's delegitimization, and it's a double standard. And scapegoating. You're putting all the blame on the Jews. At least put half the blame on the other party. At least put half the blame on Hamas. At least put half. But they won't even put half. They put all of it on the Jews. Tell somebody today they're an anti-Semite if they deserve it. Tell somebody today that they're practicing anti-Semitism, because that's why they keep getting away with it, because nobody calls them out, and everyone's afraid to call somebody anti-Semite. If they're anti-Semite, they're an anti-Semite. If they're practicing anti-Semitism, it's anti-Semitism. Anytime you judge one person by one standard and a judge is judged by a different standard, that's anti-Semitism. It just is. It just is. Simple as that. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and click on one of the videos above for more.